Hi, I'm Justin Dunn from Nottingham, England, and you're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics.
Hi, this is Kelly. This is Arthur. Today's episode is about Illinois. Here are some facts about Illinois. Illinois is the sixth most populous state with 12.8 million people. It's the 25th by area. The capital of Illinois is Springfield. The biggest city is Chicago. The governor is Republican Bruce Rauner. The senators are Democrats Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth. Illinois sends 18 representatives to the U.S. House of Representatives. 11 Democrats and 7 Republicans. Goodbye.
Welcome back to Two Broads Talking Politics. For today's episode, we are joined by several guests to have a roundtable discussion about Illinois politics. Welcome Beth, Jessica, and our very own Kelly. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
I am super excited about this because A, it's the first episode we've done about a state that has already passed its primary, which is super exciting. And B, it is the first state we have done that is considered a blue state. Every state we've looked at so far is considered a red state. So I'm sure we'll discover as we talk that it's more complicated than that. But
so let's get started and just have everybody, if you could go around and sort of introduce yourself and let us know how you have gotten involved in Illinois politics. Kelly, why don't we start with you since you are the co-host?
Sure. So I, as listeners know, live in Chicago. I live on the south side of Chicago, and I'm a leader in Indivisible Chicago South Side. I run the Facebook and Instagram accounts, but I'm also part of the sort of leadership team, bigger leadership team. And I'm also sort of quasi-involved in Indivisible Chicago as a bigger group. I'm also involved in the Moms Demand Action Chicago chapter, and pretty much anywhere I can interject myself into politics in Chicago, I do so.
This is Beth. I am the leader of Indivisible Carbondale, and I also am involved with She Votes Illinois. I'm on their board. It's a new PAC on women's issues that started after a forum on women's issues, a gubernatorial forum, and we pretty much took off. And then Indivisible Illinois, but I got involved because of being forced out of the work world on disability. And when Trump was elected, I just saw how hard that was going to be on individuals with disabilities and people that are close to the poverty level and relying on all of our social safety nets. And I just felt like it was the time that we had to do everything that we could, and I wasn't doing everything I could. So I was watching Rachel Maddow, and she talked about Indivisible, and so I went out and got involved. It sounds corny, but I was in law school trying to start a second career after being kicked out of the corporate world, and I got all inspired and started Indivisible Carbondale, and here I am.
My name is Jessica Mostinger. I'm founded, Indivisible Metro East. We are going after our diverse population here of progressive people that happen to live in East St. Louis, Cahokia, and all the neighborhoods and the municipalities that make up the Metro East here. So I decided to get involved with Indivisible because I was disabled after serving in the Navy, ended up having my third C-section on the Big Island of Hawaii, and ended up getting something called necrotizing vasculitis. I'm on my second life here, so I've always wanted to become involved. I was raised in the government. I'm third generation military brat, and again, veteran myself. My husband just retired after 21 years of service, and I have been itching to get involved since the Iraq invasion. So it's been a long time of waiting. And I saw and heard about Indivisible and just decided that it was a really good idea. And that's what we need, because nothing gets me more irritated than voter apathy. We have too many things that are important, and our government and politics has a direct effect on my life, and I know it has a direct effect on other people's lives. My bugaboo is poverty, working class issues, lack of opportunity. And so I'm hoping not just to turn our district and area blue, but I'm also wanting and working for progressive change that's going to be positive, especially for our diverse and minority populations that have been disinvested in. So I'm sure you understand Southside Chicago has some of the same issues.
Let's get started talking about some of those issues. What would you say are going to be maybe your top 2 or 3 issues that you think people will be really interested in Illinois in the midterms coming up?
Well, we have a gubernatorial race here in Illinois this year. So for as much as Illinois is known as a blue state, we do have a Republican governor who is terrible, just objectively terrible.
But also very unpopular.
Also
right?
wildly unpopular. I think even his wife doesn't like his politics. So I think that one of the things that's really important, as far as I can tell, to Illinois voters is that our state has just been broken for a while now. We didn't have a budget for several years, which really cut into things like education in the state and services that the state provides. And we started to lose students for higher education, would start to go to other places because there wasn't a budget in the state. So state budget and government functioning are my big issues.
This is Beth again from Carbondale. Definitely the state budget and funding for our services is a big thing for us in Southern Illinois too. And in that instance, we are pushing really hard for a fair income tax, because that will add a lot to our coffers and only affect a very small percentage of our population. And it would hopefully free up some money at the state level to support our local areas and reduce some of, free up the ability to eventually, as we pay off some of our debt, be able to reduce some of our property taxes, because that is really hurting Illinois badly, is our reliance on things that are typically, our education and things like that are typically funded more at the state level in other states, are really pushed down to the local level in Illinois. And this funding is not coming from the state. And that is causing an over-reliance on local funding, which creates a lot of inequality depending on the level of income and the level of property value where you live. And I think that's just a big issue that you see all over the state, that there's just a lot of inequality based on the value of homes in your neighborhood, on how your schools are funded, on everything, and it might be fixed in some certain areas because they have some way to balance it out. But overall, statewide, all of our services are very different because of that. I think that's a big issue, is to get more statewide funding and less locality-based funding.
This is Jessica from the Indivisible Metro East. I would say the biggest issue that I come about is, again, disinvestment that we see in some of our communities down here, especially East St. Louis, and Cahokia is falling further behind in that. Also, don't forget about Cairo way down there. We have the opposite of gentrification occurring here. People are leaving because everybody's kind of abandoned, and it's just been neglected, and the system's been misused and corrupted for the past 20, 25 years. That people are very excited with Indivisible coming into play because, for example, I work with different leaders that are running their own nonprofit and community organizations right now. And they're very excited to get organized because they have not been listened to. So we do have the problems with the funding and everything else, but some of these communities do have money. It's just not being allocated or properly used. So there's a big cry and hue for more outside help and everything. And services that have just been decimated here. Meals on Wheels, apprenticeship programs. Those are things that kids use to try to get out because a lot of these kids can't go to college. They can't afford it or anything else. So besides just the progressive fair income tax, that's a big one. Healthcare is also another big one. Everybody is starting to feel the pinch on Medicaid, on just the co-pays, the prices. Everything is just, it's a slow, drip. You got so much you're carrying already, and it's starting to hurt people even worse than it has been. So healthcare is a big one. And I know J.B. Pritzker is running on Medicare for all, or at least putting in the public option. So that's a positive that people mention to us around when I talk to them is a big deal. And thirdly, I know this sounds maybe not so serious, but cannabis. That brings together more libertarians and rural folk than I can talk to you about now. Everybody seems to be on board. And we have separate local issues that don't really involve state, perhaps. But we're all excited. Yay! People are excited to be involved.
So other than the governor's race, which looks like it could be potentially a win for Democrats, what are some other races that look like they might flip? Some close races going on in Illinois right now that people maybe should watch.
If J.B. Pritzker doesn't win, then he's doing something wrong. I mean, it's an interesting choice for the Democrats to have had Pritzker win the primary because we basically have it set up now as a billionaire versus a billionaire, which is an interesting sort of way to have a race going. But Rauner is so unpopular, and Pritzker has so much of his own money to spend on this race that I really do think he should win this. As far as congressional races, I mean, I think there's a lot that are going to be really interesting races this year. So there's only 7 of the 18 seats, congressional seats out of Illinois. Only 7 of them are currently held by Republicans. I think the 11 Democrats are all pretty safe. There's one open seat, I think, but it's the Democrats going to win. So of the 7 that are currently held by Republicans, I think at least 3 have a decent shot of flipping. So Sean Casten is running in the Illinois 6th, which is just outside of Chicago. And so there's a lot of Chicagoans going into that district frequently to campaign. So I think that one is definitely flippable. But I think the 2 that we're talking to later in this episode, Sara Dady, who's in the 16th, and Lauren Underwood, who's in the 14th. I think both of those could flip. They're not super Republican districts. I think the 13th is possible, too. So I think as far as congressional races, there's quite a few that could flip.
The Illinois 6 looks really interesting because it looks like they actually voted for Romney in 2012 and then Clinton in 2016. So they're like pretty much as anti-populist as it gets, I think. And I think that's a really interesting district in this election to see what they do.
I think it's a pretty wealthy district. And it's only rated as R+2, which is not very Republican in a year where people think things are going to swing anyway. Peter Roskam is not popular. He's never in the district. He's not responsive. And Sean Casten is a really terrific candidate. He's a green energy guy. I think it's going to be a really good race. I don't know the southern part of the state as well, though.
The 12th is going to be a fight. We've got a really good candidate considering. When you're around the 2 college campuses, we have super progressive views. In Edwardsville and then in Carbondale, we have super progressive viewpoints. But as soon as you leave the Metro East city parts, even within the city, there is a deep rural base here. So it's very hard to manage that tightrope. But if we can hold the Metro East and we can get as many votes buffered up here as possible, we can hold off the rural voters. It's just a matter of that balancing act. And Elizabeth will tell you that's very difficult. But we do have a good one. He's a veteran. He's a former Navy officer. He was a St. Clair County's prosecutor, state prosecutor. He's well known here in the St. Clair